As one of our Unitarian hymns puts it, we are the architects of fate. We, merely human beings, are ultimately responsible for the society, for the culture, for the messes that we create. Yet driven by self-interest, which is also a part of our nature, we find ourselves entering a new year at an extreme level of self-absorption. We show such little respect towards others with whom we share our planet. If there were a litmus test for compassion, how do you think we would fare? I wonder if our better angels can help us understand the hell that we are creating. In our temporary world of plenty, notice just a temporary world of plenty, we neglect the scarcity of food and resources available to our neighbor. The poor will rise up in fury. The depletion of the world's natural assets will prove ruinous for all. And global warming will change not only the world's climate, but wreak havoc upon the world's geopolitical stage. We will not be saved by science and technology, but only by the angels who can transform our hearts so we can imagine a different way of existing on this planet, so we can imagine a different future altogether. Returning to the time just prior to Lincoln, fashioning an imagination for a different future preoccupied the literary greats, writers like James Russell Lowell, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Harriet Beecher Stowe. All of them imagine an America without slavery. Equality proved the underlying philosophy that our angels pressed upon us. And we find ourselves today moving further away from a very core basic understanding of equality. Equality for GLBT, for women, for immigrants, for people of color, and for the living organisms of this earth. The notion of equality, which was initially focused on the abolitionist movement, led quite naturally to other arenas. Thomas Wentworth Higginson wrote an essay in 1859 called "Ought Women to Learn the Alphabet?" Quite frankly, I don't know how our Utah legislature today would answer that question. But Higginson argued, this is really quite interesting, he argued there's no middle ground when it comes to equality. You can't be just a little bit equal. And as in the case of women, he wrote, either women were subjects or they were equal. Nothing in between. Now, all the writers at that time, if I may be so bold as to summarize, all the writers held forth that there were a certain set of beliefs that transcended individuals, their prejudice, and lack of compassion. These certain set of beliefs need to explode upon society because without them, without the fundamental requisite to transcend individual bias, we will topple over a moral cliff that will jeopardize the future for all. Cornel West wrote recently about freeing ourselves from what he calls myopic white greed that has intimidated all of us and made us fearful and helpless. He writes, "Our nation and world now have the blues, So we must learn from our blues people, from the grand examples of Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., Miles Horton, and Fannie Lou Hamer. The future of America depends on vision, courage, and determination of compassionate people to engage the powers that be. Two huge factors come to mind when I contemplate the new year. And the new year always serves as a gateway into the future, doesn't it? The angels that will hopefully guide our judgments and decisions this coming year will need to make us less afraid of incurring some sacrifice. Sacrifice looms as inevitable, but in our selfishness, we refuse to go there. The well springs that feed this selfless ideal stems from the same source of the 19th century writers and the Hebrew prophets of old, namely tapping into a core of beliefs that transcend the individual. Our nation's indifference to the rising number of poor, especially among children, our indifference to those who suffer medically without insurance, our indifference to those who have come back from fighting our wars with so little support to heal their wounds, and enough indifference expressed during the worst of our recessionary times to those who have lost so much, indicate that the tenuous threads that hold a community together have unraveled to the point where the center will no longer hold. If we allow our better angels to take us outside of our own self-interest, whereby we feel the pain and suffering of others, then giving back to the commonwealth from our own prosperity will seem as natural as following the principles inherent in all the world's great religions, namely humility, mercy, compassion, equality. So if sacrifice is one aspect that must draw the attention of our better angels, then the other factor deals with our inability to somehow engage in long-term thinking. Some people use the term sustainable development, which is accurate, but I think that calling it long-term thinking might make it easier for people to understand. The task is to secure a future without wrecking the planet. It's that easy, or so it seems. I don't know why non-renewable resources is so difficult to understand. But I think the work of angels would be easier if we used simpler words and concepts. By continuing to degrade the world that gave us birth, the myopic vision of our superiority among species in a biological world will prove that our failure to think long-term will curtail any hope of a future unfolding. Now, I am really surprised that it takes the likes of E.O. Wilson to say, just candidly, conservation and environmentalism are not hobbies. They are a survival practice. The better angels of our nature need to help us understand that. So using the idea of the better angels of our nature offers not only an easy metaphor for bringing our best selves forward, but it also touches on something fundamentally religious. Emerson introduced the idea of an oversoul, a spirit that transcends us individuals to comprise something profound, morally sound, and life-giving. Some ministers of our day reflect a similar idea where they discuss this sense of a larger heartbeat in a culture, something larger than just our own. Our nation's future, they say, depends on how we as a people let this larger heartbeat within our own hearts. And so the question posed over and over again throughout history, yet so painfully urgent today, is this: do we live to serve ourselves alone, or shall our lives bear witness to something larger? Thomas Jefferson may have had this in mind when he famously said, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just." I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just. Come visit, you better angels of our nature. Lift us to greater insights. Inspire our visions. Help us to act courageously. Lead us wisely through a difficult 2013. Help us restore confidence in the future and lead us on a path towards that which is just.